Okay, guys, if we are on Facebook, this says we still are live on Facebook. Sorry, I had some technical issues there, which are now sorted out. But it is a great privilege for me, and it's wonderful to see an old friend who I actually haven't seen for a long time, Duncan Stewart. And yeah, Duncan, we had a brief chat before, but just to say again, as I have said at the beginning of all these chats, that we're talking about business, but we are specifically focusing on Christ in our business. We love kingdom business. We totally appreciate that He enables us to do business. He says in the Bible that through our hands we've been given the ability to create wealth, and so we have a very, I think, for some people in the business sphere, they may think, what's an artist going to teach us about business? But I would absolutely say that art is, aside from my personal passion with art, and certainly the people that know me know that I've often said, Duncan, most of the art in my house is the fruit of Duncan's hands. But art is a very difficult business because most artists only ever really get acknowledged and become, wealthy after they died. Because it's, when the resource becomes limited, then the value goes right up. But Duncan, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now. Just a brief bio, where you're at, and we were just talking even, around just your COVID experience so far.
Super, Mark. Thank you so much. Always happy to just to connect, and lovely to see you again. And just to pick up where we left off. I'm a Northern Transvaal supporter, Blue Bulls. Sorry, probably that's put me right out the picture. But I did put a shark in for you, so I'm just not that all those things are important. But I grew up on a farm in Zanin in the Northern Transvaal, went to school in Pretoria, did national service, and then ended up studying graphic design because I wasn't saved at that point. And I kind of thought, this is awesome. I love to draw and use my art, and this way I can use it to make money. So, because I'd never had any desire to be an artist. And, for me, my perception at the time of an artist was someone who had issues, was dysfunctional on many levels, and I thought, no, I just can't buy into that. And it's interesting that is the narrative I believed. And if we look at the world now, with the myriad of narratives that are out there, it's really, really becoming key to know what's true, and so obviously to know Jesus and to line things according to truth in all these narratives that we're hearing. But I studied graphics and then went into advertising, and then one day in advertising, I was searching for meaning. I was searching for purpose. I was searching for is this really what it's all about? You get 2.5 BMWs and a house and some white appliances, and is that life? Is that enough? And at the same time, God was really wooing me. But briefly, one day in the ad agency, Hunter Scaris, who I was working, one of the creative directors passed me, and in the passage he said, hey, Duncan, just have a look at this ladder that you're climbing. Look what it's leaning against, because that's where you're going to end up. It's obvious, but it was a lovely tool for me to use to see my trajectory. And I stepped off that ladder and I thought, I'm actually not an advertising person. There's more inside of me than just Omo washing commercials. Mm. And so that, together with something that God had been doing in my heart, eventually sent me on a journey into the unknown. And I speak a little bit about it in various places about, our learned identity, and then having to unlearn that in times of crisis, like the things that no longer fit into the new space that you're living, and then to relearn. And so for me, it was a critical time. So I was about 22, 23. I sold everything I had and raised money, and I went to art school in Florence because I'd always said to myself, I just want to give myself 2 years to explore why I have this desire to draw and paint. It wasn't even developed or anything. It was just a desire. And so that took me to Florence in Italy, and really, really transformative years. Not easy. sounds romantic on the outside, and it was indeed incredibly romantic. I met my future wife there, who is German, and we got married in the south of France. So I just want to say, in the stepping out of our comfort zone and in obedience to Christ, when he says, if whoever leaves father, mother, brother, sister for my sake will inherit this and so much more. I inherited a gazillion times more than if I had stayed on a safe trajectory in an advertising world. I mean, I can't say that definitively, but really what's happened over the last 20 years, since 2000, is insane and miraculous. So that's in a nutshell. And then we returned to Port Elizabeth. My wife's parents sadly passed away from cancer. So we decided to settle where my folks were, and my folks had retired from the farm up in Zanin down to PE. And so, just pragmatically, it makes sense if you want to start a family to be where family is. And so the Eastern Cape has become home to a whole lot of Stuarts now.
Wow, absolutely. How many kids? 4 kids?
4 amazing, amazing blessings. Yeah.
Yeah. Duncan, so I met Duncan. I met you on your first year back from your Italy, training, really. It was training. I mean, I remember you had an exhibition. Yeah, you had an exhibition in Joburg, and somehow I got to that exhibition, and you were literally selling your art to pay for your next year of study in Italy. And I was just immediately fascinated by not only your story of faith, and that's what I loved was how your faith journey and your artistic, and what then you were putting on paper just were tracking together. And so absolutely spirit inspired. And I felt, I think artists naturally are creative, but like anything, even in business, we can be naturally good and creative in business. But when you partner with the Holy Spirit, it almost takes it to another level. And I suppose that's what really excited me about your journey at the time.
Yeah. I mean, that I've got a wealth of testimony of the reality and the realness that God is real, and he does provide, and he is about seeing his kingdom established. And as long as we make that our main goal, his supply and his provision, whether it be financial or strength or wisdom, is unfaltering and trustworthy. So it's an incredible testimony. But speaking about creativity, and I think that's probably more helpful for people that are watching in terms of business, and why I think creativity is so key. So I've been on a journey, obviously, as an artist. It's been really tough because one has to not sell your soul, but you need to sell product, and yet you are the product. But a lot of my product is about trying to get the glory to Jesus, is to deflect the attention from myself onto the reason why I'm here. And there's nothing worse than me than selling religion, of course. It's just like not something that I signed up for. But yet God's put his spirit inside of me. He's anointed me. He's gifted me with incredible skills. I mean, I love to paint, draw, sculpt, almost anything that he's enabled me to do incredible things. And so I'm just grateful for that. But it's really been an intellectual, mental struggle to find my identity. And one of the key things that I mentioned to a lot of people about being creative is that the number one rule for creativity is to be true to yourself. And that's not far from what Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true, and as sure as night follows the day, you can't be false to any man. I mean, it's exactly that. But what does it mean to be true to yourself, to follow your own unique individuality? Because that's essentially what differentiates us. See, I can try and imagine what, if I want to try and survive in my own strength, which God says I don't have to do anymore, that responsibility is given over to him. So if I want to try and survive in my own strength, then I'm fretting, I'm striving about, I wonder what picture Mark Slaughter would like. I wonder if he likes cows, if I paint cows. And I'm trying to imagine what I've got no chance of really getting right. And I've enslaved myself to an entity that is meaningless, if you know what I mean. If I'm trying to create work that I imagine the market wants, I'm dead in the water.
Wow.
But if I'm true to myself, what comes out of me is unique. And so that being true to who God made you uniquely is key, no matter what business, sport, anything, because God has given all of us gifts and callings. And I think that's really key, the deep why. Who are you? Why are you here? What has God called me to do? What are the gifts He's placed in my hands? What are those dreams we had as small kids? And what was that little advantage we had as a lighty when God said, when people would just say, "Yeah, you're good at this, man. You're just good at this." When you just, some things just come naturally to you. It could be, I don't know, just listening. That might be your gift of just being able to listen. And one of the dangers that I've seen, and it's toxic at the moment with social media, is comparison. And I just want to let that sink in, because the minute we begin to compare ourselves with others, there are always going to be a million better artists than me, more skillful, more successful, more famous, more everything, definitely taller. But God has not called me to be any of them. And often people say to me, why do you can't copy like Picasso or Van Gogh? I said, I'm happy to copy them. I have no desire to be Rembrandt. I would love to be able to have some of his skill, but I want to be Duncan. The world doesn't need another Rembrandt. It's had a Rembrandt. And for all the guys that are listening, guys and girls, businessmen and women, we don't need another Elon Musk. We don't need another Mark Slaughter. We need another you. And so finding out who you are and what you are uniquely shaped with through your whole history is really key, and unlocking that. And that is what I think creativity does. It gives you courage to unlock some of your unique potentials and to think differently.
Duncan, like this, I'm fascinated by this, and I'm glad we came back to it, because I know we're going to talk about creativity, but I really wanted to come talk about identity, but I'm so encouraged how you put these two together, and I'm intrigued by that. But, this thing of the why, obviously Simon Sinek's getting a lot of traction with his book. He's written about it. And after reading Simon Sinek's other book, Leaders Eat Last, I actually emailed him and I had to ask, are you a reborn Christian? Because I think he articulated something of the kingdom vision for leadership better than I'd heard anybody else do it. And I think he's a good, solid Jewish citizen. Whether he's saved is another story. But he's, again, when he speaks about the why, it's a biblical concept about identity. And, I think it's not something people often talk about in business is your identity. That they don't even, because so often people just think, well, business is about, just making money at the end of the day. And how many people are really governed by the mammon? By actually saying this career actually generates X amount of profit or this amount of money. And even though it's not my passion, even though, like you said, in the playground, my friends used to say, I'm so good at this, but that thing is teaching, or that thing is art. How can you ever make money? I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And so what I love, Duncan, is not only is the authority in what you're saying in terms of you've lived this by actually following that narrow road of being an artist, but you've recognized how it affects your ability to be creative and it's almost like God honors your faith almost by saying, okay, well done. Now I'm going to actually explode what I've put inside of you, even in a faith dynamic, which I think is massively powerful.
Yeah, as you touch on that, I just want to throw out two definitions and where they tie up with faith. So Ken Robinson, whom I'm a great fan of, I don't know if you know Ken Robinson, he wrote, he's got the most watched TED talk on how traditional schooling kills creativity. And, one of his definitions for imagination is the power to bring to mind things that aren't present. So any of us all over the world, whoever's watching, have this ability. It's phenomenal how underutilized our imagination is. Yes, it can be used for evil, as we see numerous times.
Yeah.
But but that doesn't disqualify us from using it for good. You know, it's kind of, it's available, but we're not using it. So all of us you have the ability to be the most imaginative person that ever hit the world. But if you sit in your chair imagining all day, and there's not one outward application of that thought or those dreams or those imaginations, that's meaningless.
Wow.
So creativity is essentially applying that imagination. Creativity says having original ideas that have value. And I love that definition. So let's quickly go to Hebrews chapter 11. What is the first verse? I mean, we all know it. It says, and I'm just going to replace it. Faith or imagination is the substance of things hoped for or the evidence of things unseen. So faith and imagination are very similar in content. They're very similar. You know, I've got faith that this is going to happen. I've got faith that God can provide. I can imagine it. I can visualize it. And somewhere in scripture, it says quite clearly that faith without works, without application, is meaningless.
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
And we know that we are made in the image and likeness of God. And I know this has probably been drummed in and it just wore off a duck's back, but we are made in the image, and from image we get the word imagination. So we are made out of the imagination of God in his form, the form that we understand in terms of his likeness, his internal spiritual likeness and creativity and ability to harness raw material and so organize them into a Tower of Babel or into a 3D printer. We have that imagination and we need to apply it. And what I think is so exciting about the trauma, I don't want to, maybe trauma is the wrong word, but about the season of COVID, is that it's become enormously, or has even in the beginning, enormously unsettling as people's identity in what they previously did. You know, they earned a salary, they did a job, all of that was kind of shelved. And so their identity is under threat. Like, I'm no longer that guy. I'm no longer that girl who can bring home a paycheck. So then who am I? Mm-hmm. So in that chaotic environment, there's pain. There's a lot of unlearning. It's kind of like, that just doesn't work for me anymore. Who am I really? You know, I've got no more, I can't add any value. So what value am I? You know, who am I? But the question is wrong. And we've often heard this, it's not who am I, it's whose am I? Because once I belong to someone, and I'm stuck in Philippians, and Philippians 1, Paul starts off, he says, me and Timothy, I think it is, servants of the Almighty God. And the commentary that I've been going through unpacks servants in terms of doulos being slave or servant. And essentially to say you are a servant or a slave, and I know Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, which is amazing. But to be a servant or a slave is you are no longer your own property at all. From the minute you wake up and are conscious to the minute you go to bed at night, you are no longer your own. You are on a mission, or you're in the service of the King. And then all your needs and all your requirements are to be met by him. So in some ways, that's how we as a family have weathered many storms, because I've said, Lord, I'm your boy. I'm here desiring to see your kingdom come through my work, whether it be through professional service, as in a commission, and I deliver it timeously and professionally and ethically, or whether it be work inspired by your Holy Spirit that I feel needs to just be communicated. It's not really my life that's important here. It's your kingdom, and to get people reconciled to you through the gifts that you've given me. So in this time of chaos and COVID, where people's identity has been largely shaken a lot because they no longer can identify with who they were and what they were able to do. Now they have to be someone. Who are they being in the time of crisis? Are they being filled with peace and joy and kindness and long suffering and the fruits. Is there evidence of the fruits of the Spirit? And as Peter said, it needs to be multiplying. I'm the first one to put my hands up and say, "Jeez, Lord, be gracious to me," because I need to grow in these things. But I think COVID has created chaos, and with just a little bit of imagination, we get to take those bits of chaos and reorder them and organize them in something that is original and has value. But it might mean unlearning a lot of things and relearning new things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I absolutely love that. I really do, and I likewise agree that where things go upside down, there's always opportunity. There really is, and it's having the presence of mind and the presence of God really to be able to not be stressed. And I think that's the big issue, is that it's very difficult to be creative when you're stressed, because you have peace. You can actually observe, and it's something that you've picked up on just in something we were chatting about, beforehand, is this ability to actually observe and see what's going on, and then to process it, and then to have a creative solution, So maybe speak a bit about observation, and, even now in this time, is firstly, or maybe touch on how you can minister to yourself into peace and say, Lord, my identity is in you, so I'm not going to worry, which means I can continue to be creative. Because one thing's for absolute sure is I know when I've been stressed, my creativity tanks. And for us to harness opportunity now, we actually can't be stressed.
Yes.
So how do we observe well? And how do we first of all remain unstressed, I suppose, or more so, how do we observe well if we can remain unstressed, and then act on it?
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways to answer this, and I might go all over the place. The thought of community comes to mind. The thought of vulnerability comes to mind. The thought of being authentic within a small group of people who are okay with me being broken. Especially, I've got a men's group that I'm part of, and then 3 inner circle guys, if you like, that are equally dependent on the grace of God in their lives, and so bouncing that off and not being alone, not isolating oneself, I think is one thing that's really important. And one of the key things, I think, in terms of leadership, is modeling vulnerability, modeling the fact that we can apologize, modeling that we don't all have the answers. The best example would be for my kids. If I'm unable to say sorry to them when I mess up, how are they ever going to learn to say sorry when they mess up? So modeling that to them, and apologizing when I've been too strict, or I've shouted or something like that, or I've said something that's been mean, and having to eat humble pie, and I mean, children can make you eat humble pie big time. So I think there's something in that. I just want to. There are 2 thoughts that I have. The one is a quote. No, I won't read that one now. Actually, they're both a bit wrong for now. But that sense of regaining your peace, I mean, I can really testify to, because when I'm anxious about end of the month, almost every end of the month for the last 10 years has been precarious. Okay, not every, but largely. And I found myself broken before the Lord, And one of the things is that, I'm kind of challenged, and I don't have the answers for sure, but I'm kind of challenged, like, I've got to guard my mind, because it is the battleground, taking every thought captive. So thoughts that come to me are like, you're not working hard enough, you're procrastinating, you're lazy, you're not doing stuff. And I've got to take these thoughts and be able to be honest about them and share them with people that I trust, and say, is there really room for me to actually be corrected here for repentance to
Yeah.
come in and say, you know, I need to pull finger and get going, or actually, you know, where's your faith and trust in God? And so that's been that has been the epitome of working out your salvation with fear and trembling in a way. It's like, well, how much do I just sit back and allow God to be God if I know I'm busy about his business? But then what part of me needs to hustle and needs, and so in this time, I feel like I have one of the key things that I would say is just go. You know, you can't, you know, the old story of you can't steer a ship that's not moving.
Yeah.
And I've always believed that. I've always believed, you know, even if I'm going down the wrong way, if I'm moving like a sailboat and the wind of the Holy Spirit is blowing, at least he can steer me where I need to go. But if I'm not moving, that paralysis that comes from over analyzing is very dangerous. And I think action, you know, there's that great, I think it was by Teddy Roosevelt, that fantastic quote that said, the glory doesn't go to the people who criticize and say you're doing it wrong and all this. It goes to the man in the ring who gets knocked down and gets up and keeps fighting. And I love that, because it's what I think COVID has done is it's taken away the time to overanalyze everything. We don't have the time now to say, well, you know, when I get my life in order, I'm going to commit to Jesus. You know, when I get it all sorted, or when I get my whole e-commerce game waxed, then I'm going to launch. There's no more time for that. Now you just launch. Take what you got, get going, put it out there. And the beauty of that is that you get to be creative, because then problems arise and we actually will find ourselves with solutions, divine solutions arriving at that point as they come. But if I'm just sitting in the background thinking, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, but I just need to get it all ready, and it's costing me money to get it all ready, and I can't get there. That has been a key learning for me, you know, is to just act. And I think COVID has done that. It said, it doesn't matter if you don't know how to do it, just start the process of what you can offer. What do you have in your hands? So for me, online art lessons, I don't know how that works. For me, online sales, I don't know how that works, but let me try with Facebook, and we start going. So it's been interesting to find where is the grace just to reflect and observe, and where's the grace to risk and just go for it. And we know risk is another word for faith as well, and just try things.
Yeah, and I suppose it's acknowledging your responsibility and the practical wisdom that the Bible is full of, which says, don't let your hand be idle at night, you know, put your hand to the plow, keep focused. I mean, there's stacks of practical wisdom and stacks that we can do, yet also at the same time, we balance that with complete and utter trust in the Lord, you know, to do what we actually can't do. And somehow, and I think that's massively, I mean, Duncan, you know, I could say what you've just said from a business perspective is absolutely, like, from a principle, is massive. You know, I think this thing where guys try and get it 100% right, and then they don't do this, don't do that, and what happens is they lose opportunity. And it's something that's a mark on, you know, the Jewish, and I say this very, I suppose, third hand, but you know, you hear these stories in some of the Jewish culture, but you just know. But I kind of believe biblically this would be true, but they just have a let's do it kind of mentality, you know, and part of that is that because they've got such a strong community, which is built around Shabbats and, you know, Friday nights, that the fear of failure is just not really an issue. And I think that's a big deal. You know, most guys want it so perfect because they're just so terrified of failing. And it's almost, and again, it comes straight back to identity. You know, when you know that you're his boy. I mean, you know what? Who cares if I fail?
Yeah.
Like but that amazing quote, you know?
Completely. That's the deep work that maybe hopefully COVID gave a lot of people when things slowed down a bit, and is to kind of take some time, you can't be rushing, you know. One of the, you know, I speak about some of the studio skills that I've learned as an artist that are maybe helpful for business, and they would be like observation, envisioning things, critiquing things, and then reflecting on things. There's 4 or 5 ideas, but you know, one of the things that I'm struck with when I teach adults, kids don't have this problem, but when I teach adults to draw, so firstly, I'll say, you know, who of you can draw? And most adults say, no, I can't draw anything. You know, I can't draw with a ruler. I can't draw a stick man. And so immediately there's a truth or narrative that they hold on to be true in their heads, and that is evidence to me. So when I get people to draw a still life, what happens is that 90% of the time, what people end up drawing, just say it's a mug with a flower in it, what 90% of people, or what adults learning to draw end up drawing 90% of the time, is not what's actually in front of them. Because if you think about it, all the information that they need to draw a photographic rendering of that object is all there. All the information is out there. So why is it that when it comes to this piece of paper, it looks nothing, well, far from that thing? And the reason is because people draw what they think they're seeing, and they draw what they think they're seeing because, and I'm going to come to education now, because we have grown up in a world, and this is Ken Robinson's bugbear and mine too, and it makes complete rational sense. We've grown up in a world where our schooling system is so outdated. I'm not saying education is unimportant. I'm saying the system is so outdated. It was meant for an industrial era. It is run even like a factory with bells and periods, and you bring a grade through and they get inputted with history, and then the next grade gets inputted with geography, and then they get moved out, and their batch number is the year they went in, and the batch number is when they released, and their only real skill is being able to memorize what was learnt in those batches. And if they memorized well, then they clever, and if they didn't, then they dumb, and then they are allocated into their different career paths, which is so far from the glorious, unique diversity that is in each person. So, I mean, don't even get me started on how the education system is failing us. But to come back to my art students, we have grown up in a world where verbal, rational, logical brain exercises are the way we survive. So we learn by communicating, we survive by communicating verbally. Help me, I need water, I need food. This is how we do it. And so we speak ourselves into a form of existence, but we've completely, up to age 6, you know, when you ask let me just get this right. You know, a 6-year-old draws like a 6-year-old and speaks like a 6-year-old. An adult talks like an adult, but draws like a 6-year-old in general. So something in their development, in all of our development, stopped more or less the time when we hit a formal education. And it was because the arts, the value that is placed on non-linear thinking, intuitive, more emotive, evocative senses, that is a massive part of our softer, unspoken side. Call it what you want, your creative, artistic, and it's been, you know, it definitely doesn't fit into the macho realm of things. And yet it's fundamental to who God made us to be.
Yeah.
I mean, look at our God. He is kind. He is compassionate. He is merciful. He is gentle. He is able to, I mean, you can get me going. Anyway, the bottom line is that we've developed, and our educational system globally has developed a way of thinking that is very narrow, and our intelligence is measuring just a very narrow way of thinking. And so what I try and do is I try and help people, and a lot of this is researched, it's empirically researched, papers written about the left and right brain and about the different responsibilities and roles that they have to play in learning and existing in the world. And so our non-verbal, intuitive side really comes from our right hemisphere and the logical verbal from the left hemisphere, and we're only using our left brain most of the time to exist in the world, and that's how we do our maths and science and languages, and that's what we scored on in the world, and that's where we get a career. But now we've got COVID, and now we need solutions, and now we've got to begin to observe, and we don't know how to observe. We don't know how to reflect. We don't know how to measure the gestalt, the spirit of the zeitgeist of the times, because we're unable to make quantum leaps from here to here and bring unrelated things together and see things in a different composition and look at them from the other side and really no longer just respond to the symbols and the forms of what we've been taught, but to look at what's there. So, for example, I mean, it's an amazing exercise teaching adults to draw and helping them overcome. And so if I can just quickly run through, you know, when you're learning to drive a car, there's sort of 5 or 6 sort of fundamental skills. You've got to learn how to steer, change gears, accelerate, brake, check your rearview mirrors, you know, and those composite skills, you don't get them all at once. And they certainly aren't brilliant all at once. But by now, you and I don't even think about them all working cohesively. And learning to draw is essentially a skill of learning to see. And this is really key because there are only 5 or so component skills. One is understanding or really seeing edges and contours and boundaries. And one can actually ask any person outside of art, what are your boundaries? What are the edges of your playing area? What are you actually seeing in terms of, you know, so there's a lot of questions, reflective questions that could come from the practice of learning to see and draw. So that's one. One of the composite skills is learning to see edges and contours. The other is learning to see positive and negative spaces. So for example, you know, the space in here is the negative space. But if I say, draw me like this, people will look and say, hand. I know what a hand looks like. And they will draw their symbol of a hand. They won't look at this form. But when I say, learn to see this space, it's got no word to describe it. So you've actually got to look. And in the looking, you access a part of your brain that was never taught at school. So I'm just going crazy here. Yeah. The other one is light and dark shadows, you know, how light affects, how forms affect light and shadow. And the fourth one is relationships, size, like the little boy that's on the canvas behind me compared to the shark. Or if I put my hand there, how big is my hand compared to my face? Whereas now, how big is it? And yet if I say, you know, draw a hand, people will draw it X size. But if you draw it this big, it means that the hand, in relationship to there's just so much in it. And we look at life and we don't actually see really what's happening. And so the skills that an artist or studio practice teaches, I think, are fundamental to existing in harmony with our with the natural skills and sciences and verbal way that we taught. I'm not dissing those at all. They're key. But I think we are very lopsided and wounded when we don't value creativity on a par with literacy.
Yeah, I would say, in my sense, is that, well, the Bible says that every man wants a vine and a fig tree. So I'm an entrepreneur through and through, and the grace of being an entrepreneur is having the ability to partner with Christ and envision something that's not there that serve to help somebody else and serve someone else. But the beauty of that is that it requires all those skills that you've just been speaking about. It requires the ability to see differently, to even have your boundaries, to test the boundaries, to just think differently. And I think this is the challenge, Duncan, like you say, is we have been so schooled to think in such a one-dimensional way, which actually disables us from being effective in business, because because the fundamental success of a business is to creatively supply a need better than somebody else in a way that people say, I love the way you're helping me. I'm just going to continue giving you cash, because You know, whether it be a piece of art that you've used all those skills to put to life in an amazing way with the depth and light and color and boundaries, etc., etc. To me, even taking in my business, you know, pet cremation was not something that I suppose I woke up and said, this is my dream job. But it was never about that. It was about doing something with my friends that solved a problem. And we got more creative than the guys in the waste trucks who were just rocking up a vet, throwing animals into the back of a, you know, and in the way we delivered ashes back. The point is that you use those same skills in whatever way to solve problems.
Yes.
And I think, like you're saying, if we've been born by God to have a vine and a fig tree, in other words, to have our own piece of land which we administer and steward under His grace, rather than to play some, you know, to be putting one part in a factory like in the Industrial Revolution. We haven't been designed to be like that. We've been designed to have a vine and a fig tree. And so art and being an artist and thinking like an artist is absolutely fundamental to actually walk into our call of owning our piece of land.
I agree fully. I mean, I tell everyone that they're creative. It's almost like I'm on repeat mode. You creative. You really are creative. You really are creative. It's there. It really is there. Just begin to do the one thing. Do the one thing that gets you going, into the next thing. Just do the one thing and you will see. I just want to read. So I came across an article in the New York Times about the importance of what art schools really teach. And so it was written by two professors, Lois Hatland and Ellen Winner. But just have a listen to this. It says, intelligence and thinking ability are far more complex than what we choose to measure on standardized tests, which reveals little about a student's intellectual depth or desire to learn, and are poor predictors of eventual success and satisfaction in life. And then famously, we all know, or don't, but I mean, Alvin Toffler, who said, you know, illiteracy in the 21st century is not those who can't read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so we've got Google on our phones now. Our need to memorize all of that stuff that we did at school, that you and I did, is right there in a split of a second. What's really key now is to be able to think. And I'm not just saying regurgitate, I'm saying imagine and creatively know where to access and source the people, the knowledge, to create something new that is unique to us and what we're passionate about, to put it out there. That is the intelligence that uses both your skills training in terms of your specific field of study, whatever science or industry or language or LLB or whatever it may be, but then you bring it into a realm of looking at the holistic thing of it and saying, okay, so who else needs this skill that is in my hands? Where is the gap for it? And so you're able to just get the benefit of your brain, you know, both sides. And so for me, I'm passionate about that, and I will be probably till the day I die.
Duncan, speak to me quickly. We've got a few minutes left, but speak to me around what I also appreciate, aside from like what you've learned in the studio, some of these very you know, important creative tools to help you in your art. Tell me another huge thing, and you spoke that word harmony, but when we focus on a skill and then continue to focus on that skill over 20 years, can you speak about how you've seen your own skill develop? Because I think that's very significant. And I know part of your skill developing is you've gone into sculpturing, and I think I know you're a brilliant photographer. I mean, you're talking about 3D printers, which you're probably working a bit on that. But speak about how your journey and actually how you've even enjoyed getting really good at something because you've decided in faith to focus on a particular gift and skill.
Yeah, it's a difficult one for me because I feel like I haven't grown. but I think I must have, because I've been doing it for a while. But it's kind of like I look at my art sometimes and I think, one day I'm going to be an artist. One day I'm going to get it right. so thank you. But you know, as you're speaking, I'm reminded that in almost every sermon I've ever sat in, I've had a sketchbook. And it's not because the sermons are necessarily boring, but there's a deep place for me when I begin to just observe what's around me and sketch in my sketchbooks. That is like the little boy that I was always meant to be. So I have sketched, when I say sketch, I mean, I've got hundreds and thousands of sketchbooks. And so little things like this, people, you know, all my notes, things like this, okay, chickens, just moving chickens. But I would say that in the daily practice, the technical skill, God can anoint at any time, but the daily practice almost accesses and creates pathways in our brains that give you easier access in future. And I love something that Picasso said. He said, inspiration always finds me working. And there's an aspect there of, you know, I don't just pitch up at the studio when I'm feeling creative. I pitch up, I put a canvas on. Some days I labor and I waste more paint and I scrape off more paint, and I'm distraught at the end of the day because it feels like a waste. It feels like I've been wading through wet cement, and I've got to take 5 minutes before I walk into the front door and pray that I will be a light and a joy to my children, because I just want to take heads off at the shoulders at my own frustration. But I think that in the persevering, I've developed some ability that now makes, when I get the ideas, when I get the inspiration, makes me far more efficient in a much shorter time. And so that's a godsend, you know. That's I'm able to solve problems now because I've got a much greater library or alphabet to write the story with. It can be in clay, it can be in bronze, it can be in, I can speak several art languages now to say something that maybe looks better as a drawing, and maybe at another time as a photograph, and at a different time as a sculpture. So by risking and learning these various different skills and techniques, I've developed a broader language base from which to communicate to a broader audience, if you like.
Yeah. Oh, Duncan, I was actually, just while you were talking and listening, I wanted to bring up one of the pictures you did for me, just around coming to harmony and jumping on what you're speaking about, where you become more efficient. Because I do believe there's a space, you know, we see even in sport, some people when they're playing sport look like they have so much time on the ball. You know, even a guy, Roger Federer, when he hits he looks tennis, he makes such difficult things look so easy because they've got time. And a musician who, you know, plays an instrument, like, I mean, obviously there's just such, it looks so easy, but there's hours and hours and hours of pain and perseverance that goes into that. And then you reach this state of harmony, you know. And I wanted to pull up that picture, but my Lions picture, but now I can probably. But I wanted to, because you did that. I was talking to my kids about it this morning, and they were asking me about my Lions picture. And I said, you know, they were saying, wow, Dad, that guy, Duncan, he must have taken like a month or something to do that picture. So I'm just going to see if I can pull it here, Duncan. Oh, there it is. So I sent Duncan a prophetic picture I had, and he interpreted it. But you know, Duncan, I mean, I think you did this in 4 days, and my kids absolutely, they just couldn't believe it. But again, it speaks into harmony, you know. It speaks into the ability to become efficient in your skills. So I do want to just kind of end off by saying this, because I'm going to say some stuff that you aren't going to say about yourself. You are an absolutely inspirational, let me say, businessman first, because, you know, I think a lot of guys, you got to understand when Duncan says, I mean, for 10 years, to really have to fight anxiety at the end of every month is really a challenging place to be. But you've stood the course in faith, and you know God's come through, and I know you're a very mature believer as well. But also, Duncan, more than that, you are an exceptionally talented artist. I really do want to say that. You know, and I absolutely love how you continue to develop broadly in your art, and also, you know, you got different skills, but also because you are partnering with the Holy Spirit, and you are going to, and you do connect in far deeper ways through your art with people. So I do want to thank you. I've always been a massive supporter. I want to say to you listening today, honestly, this guy's art is, yeah, well, my whole house is full of it. I've always loved your art. I continue to, you know, want to support you. I just got no more wall space. But my wife's keen for a new house, and then we'll need to buy some more art one day. Duncan, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been absolutely delightful to listen to you, and we will connect. I'm going to give you a call a bit later because I think there's more to talk about. We might have to have another session just on homeschooling, because I share a lot of your sentiments. I think it's a massive subject. Duncan, I'll say to you, for me, I think homeschooling outside of my journey with Christ has changed my mindset more than anything I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's the very real aspect of deschooling the adults so that they can homeschool properly.
Yeah. Well, it's this unlearning thing, you know. Listen, let's take five more minutes. Just unlearn. What is this deal with unlearning, Duncan? I mean, you've mentioned it a few times.
No, I suppose the best example quickly is prior to going to Italy, Duncan Stewart was viewed by Duncan himself, me, and by my family and friends as someone who could make things happen, was passionate about his paddling and stuff like that, and interested in sport, and I had a certain the world that you've grown up in has kind of molded and shaped you, and they've impressed themselves upon you, and you've formed into something. I went to Italy. No one knew me. I couldn't speak the language. No one cared if I had done one doozy or anything. There was just none of, and in this fertile Renaissance soil, all of the stuff that I had learned, that who I was, and actually my salvation and conversion had happened, but some of the key sanctifying redefining of who I am happened in the soil of Florence, where I had to look to God, to who I was being defined as, because I was no longer Duncan gonna be a corporate advertising monster thing. Not that everyone in advertising is, but I'm just, you know, that title. I was now being reshaped, redefined, having to unlearn that. Okay, so I'm not going to become that. I'm no longer actually. There was a pride that had to be knocked out of me. There was an arrogance to think I could be in control that is still being knocked out of me. But there was unlearning of a lot what I've thought, that I thought life was about, and who and what I needed to make life, to make it meaningful. All of that was unlearning, and that was incredibly painful. I mean, we've got stories of, I mean, I've got endless stories, as we all probably do have, of those moments in our lives where chaos hits and reality shakes us. And we actually, when I mean reality, I mean life, death, eternity, presence, one life, eternal, you know, just the big questions of why they shake us to our very core. And I think that's what this pandemic has done.
Yeah.
And so just an encouragement to people not to gloss over it, not to try and put it away. If you're enormously uncomfortable and fearful, that's quite natural and normal. And I know God is faithful. He'll never drop you or leave you, but allow the process to happen and allow it to go deeply and listen, so that who we are being redefined as, what we need to unlearn and relearn, we can really be catapulted forward and be effective in the things that God has called us for in our unique
That's amazing.
careers. Yeah.
Duncan, thank you. You are a great blessing to many. I will touch base with you. Thank you for your time. Yeah, and we will be in touch. God bless you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.